All right, awesome. Derek, part two, asked for a follow-up conversation. Really enjoyed our first conversation specifically. And I mean this. Anytime somebody says something and I'm thinking about it the next week, the following week, at least 4 or 5 times, I found myself in regular life going, this idea of a butterfly effect. And the butterfly effect is not a new concept in physics, or in this idea of, small things creating hurricane-like conditions through a ripple effect of activity. But you've applied it specifically to business. One of the things you said was business is more like weather than it is like a machine. And I'm wondering specifically, if you could share a little bit of your lens into what that world is like for the average person that's going into business or considering navigating building something.
Yeah, so all I've done all my life is build businesses, okay, and sell some of them. And from my, just in the last year or so, I've been thinking a little bit more about retirement and not building businesses, but also maybe paying it forward. And so I know it sounds a little odd, but like lately I've been just getting on like things like Reddit and seeing what people are talking about. Like I've never been that kind of guy. I've just built the businesses. Like I don't know what everybody else is doing. I don't even know what they're talking about on Facebook or about business or whatever X or any of these things. But lately I've been kind of just trying to follow along. And there's just lots of people out there trying to understand how that how does this really work? And there's so much, there is so much content of like here's how you do it. And usually it sounds like sanitized or like clean, like here's the steps. Here's your 5 steps and it's going to work. Okay? And then that's how you sell books and stuff like that. But I've just found that like every time almost every time I listen and read about these kind of things, I'm like, no, that's not the way it works in real life. Not to get to 100 million, like not to get to 500 million in sales, and not to sell a company and make enough to retire. I mean, yeah, I mean, you might be able to put a little game plan together and a strategy for a coffee shop, but like, how do you duplicate it? How do you make, how do you move it into it's much less clean. I guess what I'm saying, it's just messy. And so that's why it's like for someone to develop the skill set to kind of make it through to like grow a big business, it's incredibly important to grab the skills that allow them to, first of all, like completely recognize that the storm, like it's not a matter of wonder if I'll go through a storm. It's a matter of you're going to go through a storm. You're going to go through little storms every other day. You're going to go through a big storm during market cycles. And there is no strategy and no plan that's going to be able to get you through that storm. It's just, first of all, your plan isn't going to know the storm is coming. Your strategic initiative is not going to know how to predict the future. It can't possibly do that. We can't predict the future. If we did that, we just buy a lottery ticket. So one of the easiest things for people to understand this concept, because they want control. Like, no, I want a plan. I want to make sure it works. And I know that's comforting, but just think 5 years ago in your life. Whoever would ever listen to what I'm saying right now, just think 5 years ago and ask yourself, yep, everything I had written in my little plan, that's where we're at, dude. Like it happened. I mean, almost inevitably when I ask, now 5 years ago, think about where you were and think about where you thought you were going to be. And how's it line up? And it's almost inevitably there's at least a snicker, if not a laugh. Okay? But the thing that I have found so comforting in this message is that when things keep going awry and that storm keeps coming as a businessman, I don't feel nearly as bad about myself when I realize, no, this is how it works. Like chaos, the maze is the territory, right? The maze isn't the thing. Chaos is not the thing you're trying to run from. Chaos is like the edge of opportunity. And I spent years, especially earlier, like in my 20s and early 30s, beating the crap out of myself because I'm like, how do I stop this chaos? And then when I realized, no, you don't stop the chaos. That's not what makes a great leader. That's not what
Hmm.
makes a business grow. You figure out how to engage it in a way that's magical. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that just was such a relief to me, Caleb. Anyways, go ahead.
Hmm. No, I was just going to say, just for context, you know, for this conversation, building on the last, you come from a background with a Deloitte CPA career. You've got graduate degrees in theology, counseling, PhD in biblical exposition, I think, on top of 30 years of operating. I think it was the largest custom build home building business in Indiana with like 2,000 homes built or something like that. Now, I don't know if I have all those details right, but even if roughly the fact that you're in these industries, you got this CPA mind, right? You understand numbers, you understand accounting. You've got this very practical business build where you're building very complex things, building homes across market cycles, across multiple decades. And then you've got this lens on it that you can also look at this through a philosophical, theological lens that also understands historic context. It's not just philosophical theory. You're looking at stories through the ages, that have been recorded and have, verifiable, evidence in archaeology and everything. So you have this interesting lens. I had an economics professor that was saying a lot of the biggest breakthroughs come from individuals that have very different worldviews. So you studied philosophy and biology, or physics and chemistry, and then when you put those two together, you see different patterns and you see different things. So just for some context, with what you're saying, part of what really stands out to me is that you're not looking at this from a perspective that doesn't understand the consulting world. When you're saying like, hey, here's the framework to use, or here's how if we structure it properly, it'll work out better.
Been there, done that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was a Deloitte consultant for years, you know.
So
So yeah, all those things that you said are true, nuanced, but true. You got the gist of it right. And yeah, and chaos theory is interesting because it's physics, but it's also kind of a world view. And I'm leaning on the world view of chaos theory. Like there's this all the physics behind this, the science behind chaos theory, but it's like when I started really more deeply understanding chaos theory, I'm like, no, this is kind of like how life works. And again, the relief came when I'm like, I don't need to fight that. I don't need to feel guilty about it. I don't need to fight it. Well, if you shift your entire, because most leaders that I work with, they spend all their life, all their day thinking, how can I solve this problem and hopefully it'll never happen again? And this was a bad day because these problems happened. Okay. Now I need to figure out ways to make sure that now, and clearly I'm a big fan of modifying a system to make sure we don't duplicate mistakes. Okay. So I
mhm.
want to make sure that's very clear. I'm a systems guy. It's hard to not be a systems guy. Deloitte, CPA, kind of a geek. I sit around. We're constantly creating and attempting to create elegant systems for our workforce to be able to engage in. Okay, and use to perform at a high level. Look, those are non-negotiables, and every business needs to have those. And if you're a small business that doesn't have those, you need to read the E-Myth, start from there, create the systems, start building the system so you can create a duplication. I'm talking about like the next level up from that. Like I'm assuming you've got those bases covered. Now, because now that I've tried to systemize everything, now that I've tried to make everything perfect, now that I've spent these years trying to create some sort of business that is consistently working and taking all the problems off my desk, and then I realized that that's never going to happen. Like there's a point in time where it's like you get the systems in place, you get the duplication in place, you grow the company, you build the business, but it's okay to then realize you're never going to get it.
Hmm.
It's never going to, you're always going to have problems.
The
The
weather's
same,
gonna,
yeah, the weather is going to
yeah.
still rock you.
I feel like prior to our first conversation, I'd always thought of, business as a machine, as an engine. And in thinking about weather, when you first mentioned it, I was tracking with you, but I didn't necessarily think that I didn't think too much about it. And I found myself after, in the context of over the summer, we spent a lot of time out in nature and in different areas. And one of the immediate things I know to do when we, come in and we get settled is for our dining tent specifically, I understand I ratchet strap. You figure out where you're going to, I ratchet strap that thing down. I will use blocks, and to hold the seams where you don't have anything to hold to, I have these leveling kind of brick blocks, Lego pieces. I'll wedge in between the fabric, put a board over it, and then I'll put rocks on it to hold it. And this thing will hold through the storm. So storms come, and I don't think about it the way that at all, the way that we set up our outdoors now. And the interesting thing is, you were talking about that, is it made me think it doesn't matter if it's sunny the whole time. Great, it's sunny. But if rain does come or a big storm does come, I feel a certain sense of peace of mind. So to me, part of that with systems is when you're talking about modifying a system, it wasn't until the first storm came through that you realize, oh, wow, we need more than just pegs in the ground, you know? And then once you realize that, you realize, oh, we need a couple ratchet straps. And then how would we do that? You're ratcheting to a tree or something else. But I'm thinking also, as you were talking about, like, how do you grow in business and understand things like wearing like a merino wool base layer? How do you have a rain shell? What do you have in different environments if you're hiking versus if you're staying stationary? And if you're going into bigger business seasons or cycles, right? Knowing, hey, we're going into fall, winter's coming, guys. Don't be surprised. And if you wake up every day during winter wondering why it's not summer, you got to adjust that perspective and be like, no, we're in a cycle right now that could be, number of weeks or number of months. We don't know how cold or wet or how much snow or freezing rain there'll be, but we're in this for a bit, and I'm thinking about market cycles right now too.
Yeah. And for example, in 2008, I was already 15 years into this real, residential construction business in 2008. And I remember during that time thinking, beating myself up, because it was the first time Hallmark had ever broken even. Okay, we've made money every single year I ever ran the company, but that year we basically broke even. We paid ourselves a little money, like enough, like maybe a little bit of a payroll, and that was pretty much it. I actually went and grabbed some consulting work on the side just to supplement my income and supplement Hallmark because it was so rough. In the middle of that storm, I knew it was rough, but I also was frustrated and beating myself up. And it was like, that was a time in our industry where there was not a sunny day for like a long time. Every day was another day where somebody else canceled a contract. Another salesperson quit because she was on commission, but how do you make a living if you're not selling houses? Okay. So losing some of my best salespeople because of that, waking up on a Monday and having 4 contracts cancel on the same day. Like, well, that's $1 million of revenue on the same day that just goes away, for example, back in 2008. And back then, because the market already shifted, that seemed like a lot at the time. My point is this: in 2010 and 11, when we got to look in the rearview mirror, the vast majority of my competitors had gone out of business or bankrupt. And when I was talking to bankers, businessmen 3 years later, it was unbelievable how many times they were congratulating me. And I'm like, isn't that odd? I was beating myself up. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this is the first year we're just breaking even. It feels like we're just kind of getting by. And then a few years later, I'm getting congratulated by, I can't believe you made it through it. So in the middle of that storm, if I can just, my thought, the way I think is if I can just help people kind of grasp, look, the storm this is the territory.
Mhm.
This is how it works.
So within the storm, practically speaking, let's assume someone's tracking with you and they kind of, I think I could see it. So you come into a week or you're in a season like this, a 2008 or something, or wherever you are. How does your lens now on a Monday morning look compared to, what it might have looked like before? Like, for example, and I think part of also what I'm interested in is from a faith perspective. Do you feel like whether it's a staff member, whether, it's someone in management, whether it's a owner, that you're suggesting, hey, be looking for butterfly like opportunities or be looking for clues as to what you should be doing? Because in terms of batten down the hatches or, shifts or adjustments, how does it get practically, how does it practically look to be taking this philosophy and using it?
So I'll start with this. When we have a plan and we have something in place and we're driving towards it, what one of the knockoff effects of that is that it's harder to shift because you've got, you're kind of like, this is where we're going. This is where we're going. And so it causes you to not be able to adapt. Okay. So in real life, it's like literally being able to get up in the morning and stay in the present and then adapt to that thing that comes to you. All right. And so what happens is when, so let me just go through a very quick story. We have a big multifamily project going on over in Ohio right now. When I say big, it's like 200 homes we have to build in a year and a half in for an investor. And the construction manager that was out there had been working with me for a long time, but he hadn't worked on this big of scale. And I didn't realize it at the time. It seemed like a good move, but he wasn't ready. He was very ready as a manager. He did great managing it, but he wasn't developed enough as a leader to handle that big of a project. Okay, so he wasn't getting that buy-in that he needed to get. So then, all right, but you've got a guy, I mean, this guy's worked for me for like 15, 20 years. He's got lots of experience and he's a great guy. All right. And he was following up on everything, but there was this, I would talk to different people, the subs and the suppliers, and there was this disconnect between him running this project. Now, this is a big enough project. I've got 3 or 4 full-time guys there all the time, but he was the guy in charge. And so, right then I had a plan, I had a strategy. So now the storm comes. This isn't working. So now, how am I going to think about this? Am I going to try to just power through it, make it happen? I've seen that happen with lots of companies. You're just going to have to deal with the guy, figure it out. Am I going to fire the guy? And what kind of impact could that create? And how am I going to replace him, especially out of state? That's an example of a storm, right? And if we've got a strategic plan and an idea and here's where we're doing and we can't vary from it, that's going to be difficult. If we try to just solve the problem immediately by firing him and that has plenty of butterfly effects, right? That has plenty of ripple effects through the organization, okay? But if we can stop thinking in those kind of black and white terms and we can start thinking in things like, wait, chaos is normal. This is what happens. We need to think about adjusting and adapting. How might we be able to make this work? And so I was able to talk with him and just be very honest and say, look, here's the challenges we're having. Here's the strengths you bring to the table. I need to be able to get you more support in this area. But that doesn't mean I want you to go away. And then he got offended at first. I then circled back with him several times relationally to explain to him what it was that was causing these things. I started working with him on different resources. I brought another younger manager in that didn't have nearly the experience as a construction person, but he's a great leader. And so he went out there, and immediately I started getting texts from subs and suppliers. Oh, I love this guy. I really like working with this guy. This is really working. Well, he just understood people well enough to know how to kind of massage that. And then I'm like, okay, we're going to shift the leadership stuff over to this new construction manager. The older construction manager then is going to be put back in that place as he watches this younger guy who's more of a natural leader work. And so now we're kind of finding our way through this and the things back on track. Now, here's what I'm saying, Caleb. Like, my decision making through that, my relational connections through that, to keep this thing, the glue together to make this thing happen and not blow up a $30 million project, was the key. Okay? But like, how do I teach that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I teach?
Do you, if you could rewind the tape and go back, when do you think it was apparent to you that you saw the symmetry of it, to look and go, oh, actually, it's not black and white here. This is normal, like you said. But when did you look and go, hey, actually, if I can, bring this circle over here and then start to help this octagon to sort of understand, hey, actually, not everything has to be like this. You can flow with it. Was there a moment that you could think that sort of became apparent?
Yeah, so there's two moments. The first moment was when I realized there was a problem. Okay. And that's when I started getting some feedback from other people. But then when I would talk to, I'll just call him the old construction manager, meaning he's just an older guy. He's not really old. He's my age. But the older construction manager started getting a little defensive about it, which then increased the odds that this is going to be a problem, because if he's getting defensive with me, he could be getting defensive with someone else. He could be a little stressed, a little overwhelmed. So I'm like, okay, there's a problem. Okay, so there was the problem. And then as I was talking with him and brainstorming with other guys about it, it hit me, oh, I could move this newer guy and replace him pretty easily in the role he's got, and put him over there to be able to make this kind of work. Now, here's the thing. I don't know how to help somebody make these kind of decisions. I like to say I make about 8 to 10 decisions a year, and that's what I get paid for. Now, I work plenty of hours, but I'm really getting paid for those 10 decisions. And so what I'm trying to do with this butterfly book is give kind of an insight into like the philosophical underpinnings almost of, in a really relatable way, of like how to think about these things. Like, oh, I'm just going to fire him. Wait, think about the butterfly effect. Well, I'm just going to kind of power through this. Wait, look, chaos is normal. You don't have to constantly be on track with the plan. That sometimes the best plan is a plan that's adaptable. Okay. In other words, the best plan is a plan that ultimately becomes a different plan. All right. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm trying to do is kind of like extend those kind of things out. And when I listen to other business leaders that are highly successful, like I hear these underpinnings in the way they talk. Okay. It's just so dang hard to put it into words, because a lot of times it feels like, no, it was kind of my gut. Well, no, there was a pattern to it. It wasn't just my gut. It was a couple texts I got. It was a little bit of a defensive conversation. It was a feeling of overwhelming from a guy. It was like, no, I got this, but where I got this doesn't mean I got this. I got this means I don't have this, and then being able to kind of sense through that. Does that help, Caleb?
Yeah. So I guess there's two sides of the coin. One is recognizing the problem, and then the second is navigating to a solution. And with what I guess my sort of take on it would be, you would probably have, when you talk about teaching this, you probably have people that have some degree of sense of the problem. A lot of people, that's the reason why they're looking for something else. The reason for this is that they probably are coming to look for some kind of solution because they have a problem. But the flip side of that is you mentioned that you had conversations with some people around you for suggestions. And that to me is interesting. When you ask about how to teach this, I kind of wonder about this, the AI, the kind of the tool that you created with the butterfly, based on butterfly boardroom principles that you've made available free of charge to people to check out. That to me almost seems like that variable, because that to me seems like certainly the first variable that could be advised upon, which is potentially come to it and then explain your problem, and then use that tool as the thinking partner, where you had surrounded yourself with advisors, trusted people that have been working with you for some time, and they would give you signal back that you would then look and make decisions based on. And so in a way, it seems like with what you built with this tool is it would give other people an opportunity to leverage some of that insight to be able to reflect their problem to you, or to the app, and then have some of those principles potentially surface considerations. Hey, have you considered this? Does that sound like an accurate description of how you've set it up?
It does. And you've hit on something really very important, which are these feedback loops. Yes, the tool that we have, which is the butterfly boardroom app, that tool, is something our team uses to kind of assess risk and to brainstorm through this way of thinking. Okay. It does give some practical advice, but often only as a metaphor. Like, here's an example of what it would look like in real life. Obviously AI doesn't know the actual people that work for us, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
However, the thing that you said, I think that was most important about your comments there, Caleb, was this idea that I do talk a lot about in the book, which is called, which is the feedback loops. You would be amazed. I literally just had lunch with a guy a couple weeks ago who runs a big development company. And he was asking me about culture, because he's like, you've got a culture at your business that we don't have. And I want to know, like, how do you create that kind of environment? And the first thing I mentioned to him is like, you don't know what's being said out in the field with employee number 50. You're not getting that feedback. You're disconnected from it. And so it's critically important, no matter how big the company gets, that the CEO has some way to get a trusted feedback loop from the field. Like, I will get an update today from Anthony, and he will tell me we've been struggling with our siding crew. We lost our siding crew. A family situation came up on this big project. So we're working on trying to hire another one. So every day, like, even though there's layers, there's plenty of theoretical layers between me and that guy working on the siding crew. That feedback's going to come to me, because I've spent years teaching my team the most important thing I want you to do this morning is assess risk. Determine what's the riskiest thing right now. Okay, the riskiest thing on that project right now is we needed a siding guy. And we've been told there was going to be a guy, it's just contracting. So we've been told there was going to be a guy show up on Friday and Monday, and he wasn't there. And then we got another crew showing and they didn't show. Okay, that's the biggest risk. So I need to know about that every day. But I don't need to tell Anthony to tell me about that. Anthony knows I got to determine the biggest risk, and I've got to report the biggest risk update to Derek. And that is 5 minutes. Like, that's not 5 hours. Okay. But it's critical that the CEO has a way for somebody to say, for 30 seconds, here's the risk. I need you to know about it. And then, and the reason is because the CEO then can take that risk from that project, and now he's putting it in like a much bigger framework, because we've got subdivisions going in Whitestown. We got another subdivision starting in north of Whitestown. We've got a big townhome project starting in Brownsburg. We got these 200 units going. We got a villa project over in Westfield. Like, I got to be thinking about, okay, how does that, what's happening here? And if I have no idea, what those risks are because I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. I put my head in the sand. I didn't get a call, so hopefully everything's okay. And I really don't want to open up a can of worms. I mean, if that's the idea, and look, somebody that thinks like that is a person that doesn't understand chaos, right?
Okay. Do you find that with some of the project management tools, some of them are out of the box with software, that some of the daily reporting, status updates, photos of the site, etc., any problems that surface, do you find that software is serving that initial data capture, that whether it's a 200-person company, a 2,000-person company, a 20-person company, that you're going to have a certain, here's the end of the day status, green, yellow, red almost photos, and then allowing tools like as AI, is set to query based on a certain way or synthesize information a certain way, that it's going to surface to like your, let's say the next tier up keys, or even potentially give you a summary of some of that stuff that then your inner circle or yourself could be making decisions on?
Yeah, those reporting mechanisms are in place for us and they need to be in place for everybody. And I think they do a great job in assessing management. Are we managing well? Are we hitting the mark? We have guidelines in place. Are we meeting those guidelines? So I think it was Warren Bennis or maybe Drucker made this pretty famous, and it's this line that is managers do the right things. No, managers do things right, but leaders do the right things. Okay, so those reporting mechanisms are going to be able to help see, okay, here's what we're doing. Are we doing that?
Mm-hmm.
But what a leader is going to do is they're going to ask, wait, I'm not sure we should be doing it that way. And that's that sixth sense of pattern recognition that I'm talking about. It's like, okay, yeah, these are the rules. These are the guidelines. This is when we order the carpeting. This is when we, have the Gantt chart working. This is how we pay bills. This is how, that's the system. But the leader is the one that's always assessing, we've put all these things in place and they've worked. Which one now is no longer working and the rule needs to be changed? Okay. We follow the rules to execute at a high level. But ultimately, the great leaders know when and how to break the rules and then reset the rules. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about here.
And doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I feel like the butterfly boardroom app seems like, why not use this if this is somebody who's in management or in leadership that's looking to grow in this area? So to check it out and to be able to use it. Is it at all technical? Like, is this, from the way the app in its current version or iteration, is it something somebody could be getting specific about with context for their industry? Yourself with custom home building, or is it something that it would be more strongly suited for higher level either personnel or project related questions?
It's a great question. Think about it like more of a problem solving device app that's based on a way of thinking about problem solving. So for instance, my wife, she's never worked, let alone run a business. She's an amazing mom, an amazing grandma, and great, unbelievable support for me, but she has no idea what I even do, really. But we were in the car the other day driving up to our cottage up north, and we were listening to the book in the car, because it's always good for me to get Jenny's perspective, because Jenny is going to have a very different perspective. And if she says this is boring, like, that's helpful feedback for me, right? Because she doesn't know anything about business. Or if she says it's interesting, that's also good feedback, because it's like, oh, somebody that doesn't know anything about business. But anyways, I said, yeah, get on the app. And she literally went in there and put in this problem. And the problem was we had a neighbor who is constantly kind of being a little too nosy. And so we'll get a package from Amazon and she'll get a text, hey, you got an Amazon package, which is fine and it's friendly. But Jenny's like, it's a little too much here, you know? And some days it's a little like, am I being watched? You know, how do I address that with a neighbor? And she loves this neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is like they go eat ice cream together, and you know, and so she literally put that in, and she's just like she literally said to me, she said, after seeing the answers and the suggestions, she says, I'm going to do what it suggested here. It was talking about small bets. It was talking about the butterfly effect. It was talking about like leaning into it, not going all in with this discussion, but maybe just, you know, giving her ideas about how to do it. And then she stopped and she said, you know, really, this isn't just like butterfly for business. Like this could be like butterfly for parenting, you know? And that hit me. And what it did for me is, and I'm not, you know, the last thing I need is to grow another business or make anything big. But what hit me about it was, this is really broader. It's more of a world view about how we think about problem solving than it is about any specific kind of issue.
Mm-hmm. So a problem solving tool that helps to reframe a situation, helps with the thinking of how you're approaching a problem.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Derek, thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate this follow-up conversation. And, you know, I sincerely appreciate getting to talk with someone who has so much experience across so many successful endeavors. Like, you know, we were chatting offline beforehand, but really whatever you put your hand to really has succeeded through your lifetime. And I hope and you know, believe that it'll continue. So, and thank you for making this available to so many people free of charge as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Caleb.
Cool.